Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into something really interesting.
Yeah.
It's all about how the Cold War and McCarthyism influenced American culture.
Yeah.
Like not just the politics and the spying,
Right.
but like movies, music, even comic books.
It's amazing.
Yeah, like Captain America fighting communists.
Exactly.
So we've got this lecture here. It was actually designed for IB/DP history students.
Wow.
But it's really fascinating stuff.
It really is. I mean, this era where like American culture basically became a battleground, you know?
Yeah.
What were people watching, reading, listening to, and how did that like shape how they saw the world?
Right. Like, could you even trust your next door neighbor?
Exactly.
If you thought they were secretly a communist.
Right.
This lecture really gets into that tension between conformity and dissent.
Yeah, and how those cultural products were kind of like weapons, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Like take that movie, I Was a Communist for the FBI. It was a huge hit, but it basically told everyone that the enemy could be anywhere.
Oh, wow.
Talk about paranoia. Can you imagine?
Yikes. I can't even imagine trying to have a casual conversation at a barbecue back then.
Right.
You'd be like looking over your shoulder wondering who's reporting you to HUAC.
Right.
The House Un-American Activities Committee?
That's right.
That's a mouthful. They were this powerful committee investigating all these suspected communists.
And sadly, a lot of like major newspapers, they just kind of backed them up, you know?
Yeah.
They'd run these stories that basically painted anyone that HUAC called in as dirty, like automatically.
It's kind of crazy how the media can be used to like shape public opinion,
Right.
but thankfully not everyone just went along with it.
Oh, absolutely not.
Like we've got these stories of some seriously gutsy journalists like Edward R. Murrow.
Oh.
He was not afraid to push back.
He went head to head with Senator McCarthy himself
Whoa.
on his show. See it now? He used McCarthy's own words and footage against him to expose his tactics.
Wow.
That was a real turning point, I think, showing people that maybe things weren't as black and white as they were being told.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if things would have gone differently if more people had spoken out sooner.
I know. Yeah.
But even with all that pressure,
Yeah.
some artists just flat out refuse to be silenced.
Absolutely. Think about Pete Seeger,
Oh, yeah.
the folk singer.
Yeah.
He got blacklisted,
Oh, wow.
basically banned from performing because of his activism and supposed communist ties.
Wow.
But did that stop him? Not a chance.
So he just kept singing.
Kept singing, kept fighting for social justice.
That's incredible.
And then there's Arthur Miller, the playwright.
Oh, yeah.
He used the Salem witch trials as an allegory for McCarthyism in his play The Crucible.
Oh, wow.
It was brilliant. Made people think critically about what was happening right in front of them.
Yeah, I've never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
It's like art can be so powerful, even like subversive.
Yes. Holding up a mirror to society, forcing people to confront those uncomfortable truths.
Speaking of uncomfortable truths, the art world itself wasn't safe.
No, it wasn't.
Like even abstract expressionism
Really?
with artists like Jackson Pollock that was seen as potentially dangerous.
Huh. The irony is that the U.S. government used abstract expressionism as propaganda abroad.
What?
Yeah. They were like, look, our artists are so free, they can paint whatever they want.
Like,
But you better not try that here.
what a mixed message.
It really is. It just shows how complex this era was. But the thing is, the legacy of McCarthyism went way beyond McCarthy himself. Like it fostered this whole culture of self-censorship that lingered in Hollywood academia, the press, long after he was gone.
So it wasn't just a blip.
No.
It really left a mark
A lasting mark.
on how Americans express themselves.
It's chilling to think about, isn't it? Imagine living in a society where you constantly second-guess yourself, afraid to speak your mind in case you're labeled a communist sympathizer.
It's like the foundation of trust was cracked.
Exactly. And people were just afraid to be themselves, afraid to express their true beliefs or even have an open dialogue.
And for those people who were targeted by McCarthy and his supporters, the consequences were devastating.
Careers destroyed, reputations, ruined lives turned upside down.
It really makes the courage of those who did speak out, like Murrow, Seeger, and Miller, even more impressive.
Absolutely. Their defiance shows us that even when faced with fear and oppression, the human spirit can endure. And it reminds us how important it is to speak truth to power, even when it's hard, even when it feels like the whole world is against you.
Because silence, as we learned,
Yeah.
is not neutrality, it's complicity.
Exactly.
So in all this darkness,
Yeah.
did any good come out of this era?
You know what? Yes, McCarthyism, despite all the chilling effects, it also kind of inadvertently ignited a counterculture.
Really?
Yeah. People who refused to be silenced, they saw what was happening and they said, enough is enough. They started championing civil liberties, demanding change. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes.
So even though there was all this fear and repression, there was also this like groundswell of resistance
Yeah.
and this renewed commitment to individual freedoms. That's actually kind of inspiring.
It really is. And that leads us to how historians have interpreted this whole period, this complex and controversial period. There are actually several schools of thought, each with a different lens through which to view McCarthyism.
So let's dive into those different perspectives.
Okay.
Because I think it'll help us understand the lasting impact of this whole era.
Absolutely. Imagine living in a community where you're constantly looking over your shoulder, wondering who you can trust.
Yeah, it's like the social fabric was like fraying.
Exactly.
Friends, neighbors, colleagues, everyone's a suspect.
Exactly. And for those people targeted by McCarthy and his supporters,
Right.
I mean, the consequences were devastating.
Yeah, this lecture mentioned blacklisting.
Yeah.
Which I know barred people from working in their fields. But can you talk more about what that actually looked like?
Blacklisting was insidious. It wasn't just an official list, It was
Right.
more like this whisper campaign that spread through entire industries.
Wow.
Imagine being denied a job, not because of your skill,
Right.
but because of rumors about your political beliefs.
That's chilling.
It was a form of social and professional exile,
Right.
cutting people off from their livelihoods and their communities.
And it wasn't just Hollywood.
No,
Like-
it extended to academia, journalism,
Oh, yeah.
even government jobs.
So this fear permeated every aspect of American life.
It did.
It's hard to imagine the impact that must have had on free speech.
Absolutely.
People must have been terrified to express any views.
It created a climate where dissent was basically equated with disloyalty.
Wow.
Silence was the safest option.
It's a stark reminder of how fragile our freedoms can be
It is.
and how easily they can be eroded by fear.
Absolutely.
Thinking back to the stories of Murrow, Seeger, and Miller,
Right.
it's clear that their actions weren't just about personal bravery.
It was about defending the very principles of a free society.
Their defiance reminds us that silence is not neutrality.
Exactly.
It's complicity.
It is, and that even small acts of resistance
Yeah.
it can have a ripple effect,
Right.
inspiring others to speak out and challenge the status quo.
It's a powerful message, especially in our own time,
Absolutely.
when we face new challenges to free speech and democratic values.
Yeah, it makes you think, what would I have done if I had lived during that era?
I know.
Would I have had the courage to speak out,
Right.
or would I have succumbed to that pressure to conform?
It's a question worth asking ourselves, especially today,
Yes.
when the lines between truth and misinformation can feel so blurred.
That's where critical thinking comes in.
Right.
We need to be able to evaluate information,
Yeah.
identify bias, and distinguish between credible sources
Right.
and those with ulterior motives.
So it's not just about absorbing information.
No.
It's about actively engaging with it,
Exactly.
questioning it,
Yeah.
forming our own conclusions.
And being aware of the potential for manipulation,
Right.
Especially in today's digital age.
Especially with social media.
Social media has created both opportunities and challenges when it comes to freedom of expression.
Yeah, because it can be a powerful tool for connecting people,
Right.
spreading awareness, but it can also be used to spread misinformation,
Exactly.
propaganda, even hate.
And those algorithms, they create echo chambers
Right.
where we're only exposed to information that confirms what we already believe.
It's almost like we're living in a modern-day version of those 1950s communities,
Right.
where everyone's afraid to speak their mind for fear of being judged.
It's a valid concern, and it highlights the importance of media literacy,
Yes.
being able to critically analyze the information we consume
Yeah.
and recognize the tactics that are used to manipulate us.
It feels like we need a 21st century Edward R. Murrow,
Right.
someone who can cut through the noise.
Maybe that's a role we can all play in our own way by being informed and engaging in dialogue,
Right.
challenging misinformation, and supporting those journalists and organizations committed to truth.
So it's recognizing that we're all part of this information ecosystem
Exactly.
and that our choices have real-world consequences.
Precisely. And it's about being mindful of the dangers of groupthink,
Right.
blindly accepting narratives.
And demonizing those who hold different views,
It's about recognizing the humanity in those we disagree with.
even as we stand firm in our own convictions.
Exactly. And it's about remembering that the fight for freedom of expression
Yeah.
is ongoing.
It's a constant battle.
It requires vigilance, courage, and a willingness to speak truth to power.
So this deep dive into the Cold War and McCarthyism isn't just a history lesson.
No, it's a call to action.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play.
In defending the values that underpin a free and open society.
It's about recognizing the patterns of the past,
Yes.
learning from them and applying those lessons to today's challenges.
And remembering that the choices we make shape the future.
Wow, this is really making me think about the choices I make every day,
Yeah,
especially online.
me too.
It's so easy to get caught up in the outrage and the echo chambers.
It is.
But we have to remember there are real people on the other side of those screens.
Absolutely.
And silencing those voices only makes our society weaker.
It's about finding that balance
Right.
between standing up for what we believe in
Yeah.
and being open to hearing other perspectives.
Okay, so we've talked about how the fear and paranoia of the McCarthy era impacted American society.
Right.
And how those themes are still relevant today.
Yes.
But this lecture also presented these 4 different schools of thought on McCarthyism itself.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about how historians can interpret the same events in such different ways.
It's a testament to the complexity of history and the importance of considering multiple perspectives.
Can we revisit those different perspectives?
Yeah.
And break them down a bit further?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's unpack these different historical takes on McCarthyism, because I think it'll help us understand, like, the lasting impact.
You got it. So first up, we've got the Orthodox historians. They basically see McCarthyism as a necessary response to the very real threat of communist spies during the Cold War.
Right.
They argue that while McCarthy's methods might have been a bit questionable,
Yeah.
the overall goal for protecting America from communism, that was justified.
So they're saying it was like the right fight, even if some of the tactics were a bit rough.
Exactly. But then you have the revisionist historians, and they come along and they're like, wait a minute.
Okay.
Maybe McCarthyism wasn't just about national security. They see it more as political opportunism,
Oh, okay.
a way for ambitious politicians to kind of climb the ladder by exploiting that fear
Right.
and silencing their opponents.
So it was more about power grabs than actual communist threats.
That's what the revisionists would argue.
Interesting.
And then you have the post-revisionists, and they acknowledge that, yeah, there were these concerns about Soviet espionage,
Right.
but they argue that McCarthyism just went way too far. They think it actually caused lasting damage to American ideals of free speech and civil liberties.
So they're kind of saying, like, okay, there was a threat, but the response was totally overblown.
Exactly, like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
Right.
And then finally, we have the New Left historians,
Okay.
and they're even more critical of McCarthyism.
All right.
They see it as part of this larger pattern of the U.S. government trying to suppress progressive movements,
Right.
all under the guise of fighting communism.
So for them, it wasn't just about one guy or one era.
No.
It was like a symptom of a much deeper issue.
Exactly.
Wow, each of these perspectives is like adding another layer to this whole story.
It's a testament to the complexity of history,
Yeah,
and the importance of considering multiple perspectives.
absolutely. It reminds me that history isn't just like a set of fixed facts. It's an ongoing conversation
Yes.
about how we understand the past.
Absolutely.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
It has.
We've explored how all that Cold War anxiety and McCarthyism really seeped into American culture.
Right.
It created this climate of fear and conformity.
But also sparked these incredible acts of courage and resistance.
Yes. We've seen how artists and journalists, they grappled with that pressure to conform.
And how some, like Murrow, Seeger, and Miller, they used their platforms to challenge the status quo.
We've talked about how the echoes of this era are still felt today.
Absolutely.
In our debates about free speech, government surveillance, even the importance of critical thinking.
It's clear that the struggle between conformity and dissent is timeless.
So as we wrap up, what's the most important takeaway for our listener?
That's a great question. I think the key takeaway here is that we all have a choice to make.
Okay.
We can choose to conform, to just go along with the crowd and stay silent when we see injustice.
Right.
Or we can choose to dissent, to speak truth to power and fight for what we believe in.
It's about recognizing that our choices, no matter how small, they can shape the world.
Exactly. And it's about remembering that the fight for freedom of expression is never over.
Right.
It requires vigilance, courage, and a willingness to challenge not just those in power,
Okay.
but also our own assumptions and biases.
So as we sign off, I'm left with this one thought for our listener.
Okay.
Knowing the chilling effect McCarthyism had on free expression, how do you think this era continues to shape our world today? What parallels can you draw to what's happening right now? What choices will you make to ensure that history doesn't repeat itself?
It's something worth thinking about. The past may be behind us, but its lessons continue to resonate, and the choices we make today will determine the future we create.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.